Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Elements of Success. I am Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide, licensed clinical professional counselor, and transformational mentor. And today we are here to dive into episode 20 of our series, Embracing Your Whole Self. And I am so excited for this topic today. I am going to be deep diving. We are probably going to go over an hour if I had to guess. But this is potentially one of the most valuable lessons in this entire series because I am going to get into one of the systems of understanding I came into as a counselor in some of my advanced training that completely changed my worldview and completely radicalized how I self-care, how I communicate with myself, and so much more. So I hope this will be of high value for you today. And as I said, I already introduced myself. I'm Safriana Luna. I love to teach and share and just shine my light in the world however I can. And teaching is one of my passions. It was my original career being a public school teacher. So, last time we were talking about ownership from the lens of beginning to understand that we play a larger role in our community, in the world of people around us. We don't just impact ourselves. And so, we were looking at the relationship between ourselves and others and taking ownership of those interconnections. So, if you were here last time, how did it feel to acknowledge the people, seen and unseen, who support you? Whether that be people that you know personally in your life that influence you on a day-to-day basis, or if this is tuning into the people who farm the crops that you consume on a daily basis, or the workers at places that you interact with, right? How does it feel to acknowledge those people, to see them as individuals? And if you haven't started doing this, right, the invitation is still there to really tune in to how interconnected we are and how, as an individual, it can be easy to see, just from our own lens. But when we start to understand our interconnection to other people and take ownership, life really changes. And then my second question, what small choice did you make this week with the collective in mind? This last week, with the collective in mind, our household participated in a general strike of not using or not shopping, not using services, canceling services, things like that to vote with our money, right? And show how we feel about the collective and the brands and companies that we agree and disagree with their policies on. So that was a small choice that we made with the collective in mind. Did you shop somewhere new? Did you participate in a strike? Did you give your dollars to small businesses? Things like that are all worthy contributions to the collective. But now, today, we are diving into embracing your whole self. So we're moving from we belong in the collective to all of me belongs. And today I am going to be sharing with you, like I said, a framework that came into my consciousness as I was a therapist, getting a lot of advanced training and learning new techniques all the time. I was practically in a training like every month, it felt like. And internal family systems is what we're going to be exploring today. Internal family systems was created, I'm using some big air quotes here, by Richard Schwartz, aka Dick Schwartz. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him. He seems like a really great guy. And he acknowledged that so much of what is taught in internal family systems, indigenous wisdom keepers, and what white people would often refer to as shamans, but the medicine people really, the people doing the journey work, but those people were essentially accessing people's inner parts and spirits and things like that. And that is essentially exactly what internal family systems is doing, but from more of a intellectual lens than a spiritual lens. So I could literally enthuse about this for forever. That's why I said strap in. This is probably going to be a longer episode because there's just so much to teach. Highly recommend grabbing a notebook if you want to take some notes on these because you might immediately recognize some of these things in yourself. Anyway, today you're going to walk away with an understanding of those inner systems of parts and how the three types, managers, exiles, and firefighters, protect and support you. We'll talk about radical self acceptance as the foundation of ownership. We'll talk a little bit about body sovereignty and reclaiming yourself from shame. And then we'll talk about creating internal safety for all parts of you. Again, this revolutionized how I saw myself. So let's dive in. You are not just one self, you are many parts. I originally heard this described as a multiplicity of personality. Not that we all are running around with dissociative identity disorder and fragmented parts. That's a whole different thing. It's only a disorder when our parts become fragmented from ourselves, meaning we can't access them and they can't access us. So it is totally normal. 100% of humans have all of these internal parts. And I love to illustrate this by everybody's tug of war. Everybody knows exactly what this is. You're trying to make a decision on what you want to eat for dinner, and a part of you wants takeout, and a part of you wants not to have to go out and to eat leftovers in the fridge. And there's another part of you that's also amenable to takeout, but wants an entirely different kind of takeout. You know, I always use the example of one part of me wants pizza, one part of me wants Chinese, one part of me wants to make the healthy choice to eat the vegetables that I have cooked already in the fridge. So if you can imagine that, that illustrates for us there are already these parts of us that disagree internally. So I just want to put that out there as reality, that you have lots of different parts that govern different belief systems, thoughts, feelings, memories, etc. And in internal family systems, they talk about how we have these different parts that developed at different times in our life. I like to believe we were sort of born with all of our inherent parts stored away in there, and they come online at different points in time. But we can also be passed on parts, legacies, which I don't think we're going to get a whole lot into that today because that's a whole other topic. There's just so much to this. But every part of us has a role and an intention. And typically, that role and intention is to protect us from harm, to protect us from outcomes that we don't want, to try and keep control, to try and make sure people like us, all kinds of reasons and ways they can protect us. But the thing is, our parts can work together harmoniously as a beautiful family system, or they can be in conflict, like a really dysfunctional family system. And most of us experience quite a bit of dysfunction in our lives because we live in a very dysfunctional society. And that's where those legacies really come in. We have a lot of legacies that have been passed down by cultures that are routed in patriarchy and fierce individualism and all of that. So we kind of already have this larger collective conflict that then reflects inside of ourselves and we're trying to protect ourselves from. But what's important to remember here is that no part of us is actually inherently bad. Every single part of us developed for a good reason, again, usually to try and protect us from something or to help us work more in an optimized way for us. And the thing is that if we have a disharmonized part, a part that is not acting in our best interests, and that's the thing, they're always trying to act in our best interests, but they're usually kind of self-sabotaging. When we create system safety, those disharmonized parts can transform and integrate into us and take on a healthier version of the role that they may have been playing. And so that is obviously work that is recommended to do with a therapist or a professional. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's important for us to first be able to acknowledge that this is happening, because I feel like just acknowledging that we have all these parts can begin to break some of those sort of chains of shame. And as a final note here, it is never, ever, ever, ever our goal to eliminate parts. We do not kill off our parts. We imprison our parts automatically, and those are the exiles that we'll talk about. But our ultimate goal is to understand and befriend our parts, because when we do that, they don't have to function the way that they were. So there are 3 types of protective parts. Now, I'm going to actually go back to the slide. I love this image at the bottom that shows all of these different people, because our parts are very much the same way. Parts of us may have a different appearance or personality or even gender expression from us when we tune in, from what we think of as us, looking in the mirror and however we perceive ourselves. So I love to give parts names because sometimes that helps us differentiate their core little personalities. But anywho, we have three types. So these types work in a cycle, and this can be a cycle of violence for ourselves when we're really trapped in like a trauma loop. But ultimately, these parts are all trying to work together. And the more that we harmonize them, the more that they can each do their individual role with more ease, less stress, not being so controlling and tight. But most of us aren't there. We've got a lot of parts running around. So, again, no shame, but I hope that this education helps you go, oh, that's what's happening, and start to gain back a little bit of self, capital S, control. So, managers are proactive protectors. They try to prevent pain before it can happen. These parts keep us organized, acceptable, in control. They are running the show day to day. They work so hard to manage how others perceive us. And these parts look like inner critics, perfectionists, people pleasers, planners, the inner CEO, the leader. There can be all kinds of parts, but managers are trying to proactively keep us from getting hurt, remembering hurt, gaining new trauma, remembering old trauma. They are doing their best to run us day to day. And I like to say, and I don't have actual statistical percentages on this, but from my own experience and working with clients, we're in managers most of the time. Most of us are in our managers most of the time because we're trying, again, to avoid the pain. Exiles are the pain themselves so much of the time. They are the vulnerable parts of us that carry the pain, they carry the trauma, the shame, the hurt. They remember. They remember what it was like to hurt. And these are often, or usually even, younger parts from childhood experiences, though we can obviously gain exiles from any circumstance. Some people, if they get into an accident as an adult, or they have a medical emergency as an adult, and they don't get the proper support to clear that out, if they're in chronic dissociation where we're just shunting our emotions over there, we can develop new exiles. Exiles are the parts we shove away, and this happens consciously and subconsciously. When we're taught, if we don't have the emotional support to really validate ourselves, to feel our feelings, it's even more likely that we're going to end up with these exiles because we've been taught that our emotions are bad. So, if we've been taught our emotions are bad, they hold these emotions and memories that felt too overwhelming as they were happening. And unfortunately, over time, it's reinforced that they were overwhelming by the managers and the firefighters who are trying to keep these traumatic memories and parts at bay. Other parts work so hard to keep the exiles exiled and hidden because both the managers and the firefighters are convinced that if an exiled part comes up, if we remember that trauma, if we feel that deep sorrow, that we're not going to function, people are going to abandon us, we're not going to get what we need, we're going to be alone, etc., etc. So exiles are holding all of that tender pain, and the managers are trying to keep us from ever accessing that pain to begin with. But that's impossible. We're going to access it, and that's where the firefighters come out. So the parts are reactive protectors. They activate when an exile part gets triggered. So you have a deep shame come up, or deep fear, or deep sadness, the firefighter is going to step in to distract. I literally describe it as a firefighter with the fire hose spraying you in the face to try and get you to be distracted from that core pain. So they step in with immediate relief, and we're going to get into lots of examples of this today. But when that pain surfaces, they're like, immediate relief, let's go. Let's distract, numb, or redirect attention away from the hurt. And this can come out in all kinds of stuff: binge eating, substance use, shopping, dissociation, rage, you name it. These are the Behaviors that when they happen, now firefighters can be aligned, right? But when these maladaptive firefighters come in and they continually go to strategies that deplete us, that destroy our health, that end up contributing to more depression or more anxiety, etc., they're not really helping, right? But then we loop back into a manager. Okay. So again, we've got our managers that we're in a majority of the time trying to run our lives, trying to keep us away from the pain. We have the exiles that come up when the pain is accessed, that remember, that hold those traumatic memories. And then when they come up, the firefighters come out to try and distract us. We're going to get into this in so much more depth. So, first, let's really deep dive on managers. These run your day to day life. They keep you safe by preventing vulnerability, rejection, or failure, right? You don't want to be vulnerable, rejected, or fail. I mean, I hope you want to be vulnerable with your loved ones, but our managers usually don't want that because it's been unsafe in the past in some capacity. We have exiles in there that have been rejected. We've had exiles in there that tried to express their feelings and were shut down. We've had exiles in there that were so excited to do something big and then they fell flat on their face and they didn't have the support to pick themselves back up. Right? Our managers are like, none of that. We're going to run this ship. We're going to run it tight. We're going to make sure we do not end up in pain. So, some common manager parts: the perfectionist. If I'm perfect, I can't be criticized. If I just do it completely right, nobody can say anything bad against me. The people pleaser. If everyone likes me, I'll be safe. If nobody ever has a problem with me because I'm always giving them exactly what they want, then I'll never be alone. The controller. If I control everything, nothing bad will happen. I know I would say a majority of us have this in there, but I know so many of my clients do, which is this belief: if we can be on top of everything, if we can never miss a notification, if we can be on top of our emails right away, if we can be there for everyone and control every situation in some way, nothing bad will happen because we won't miss the thing that's going to cause the bad thing to happen. Yeah, that's not really how it works. It's exhausting, right? So the controller attempts to control. All of these managers attempt to do what they're trying to do, but they're going to fail. These are impossible roles. So the planner, if I prepare for every scenario, this was totally me when I was younger, I won't be caught off guard. If I can think of all 1,000 scenarios that are plausible, and then how many times is that actually the scenario that comes true, right? The planner can't plan for everything. The inner critic: if I criticize myself first, others won't hurt me as much. This can absolutely show up as the person who says the self depreciating joke right away to try and stave off someone else being able to make that comment, thus becoming our own bully. The achiever: if I'm productive enough, I'll finally be worthy. People will see my value. Ultimately, our managers feel afraid of exposing their vulnerabilities. They are afraid of rejection and abandonment. They're afraid that failure will lead to shame. And they're afraid that the exiled parts are going to emerge with their pain and we're going to lose control. People won't like us. We'll be imperfect. We haven't prepared for every scenario. Oh no, there's that thing I want to criticize myself about. How am I supposed to be productive when I'm upset? Right? So again, the managers are trying to run the ship and they're trying to run a tight ship. And they're so rigid because they learned this is how I stay safe. The examples I gave were just a few examples. There are as many types of managers as there are types of people in the world because we all have our own unique manager. And what I really want to emphasize is that with all of these parts, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of each of these types of parts in your system. You just probably access a few major ones a majority of the time, and then the others crop up. But some examples of why our managers are so rigid: again, they're trying to avoid the pain. If you experienced criticism in your childhood that was really harsh, your inner critic learned to criticize you first as protection. If love was conditional on achievement, your achiever probably learned worthiness through productivity and trying to work really hard all of the time. If your needs for love weren't met, your people pleaser learned to prioritize others' needs to avoid abandonment. So you at least wouldn't be alone. You would have people around you. And if chaos felt dangerous, the controller learned to manage every detail to try and feel more secure. Again, your managers are doing their best. Unfortunately, in most cases, they're using outdated strategies that worked when you were young, but are now exhausting or depleting to you. And our goal is to help them relax and assist you in running your life instead of them running your life all the time. Understanding our exiles. So, our exiles, like I said, are the most vulnerable parts. They carry your wounds. They are the parts that your managers and firefighters work so hard to keep buried and hidden away. They, unfortunately, for them, for us, for the collective, have an important role, which is to store the information of what has hurt us or been not safe for us. But then they hold it, they are storing that information often in the long term because we don't have often the support that we need to really process our emotions and our traumas. So, our exiled parts hold childhood pain and trauma. They hold the shame about who we are. They hold our grief, our loss, our despair. They often hold our unmet needs and therefore inform our other parts in trying to get those needs met. And they are the parts that hold often those core limiting beliefs that are buried really, really deep. I'm not enough is probably one of the most common ones. I'm too much, another really common one, or I'm not lovable. I'm not lovable enough. These are some core wounds that our exiles will carry deep, deep, deep in our subconscious. And we need to be able to witness it to release it. Again, our exiles are called this because other parts push them away because their pain feels unbearable. The managers and the firefighters don't want to feel the pain, hence developing the job to push it away. The exiles get locked in the past and they still believe they're in danger. This is the wild part about our exiles and why working with somebody to do this work is so important is because those parts of us still perceive themselves to be stuck in that past situation. So for example, if you're a person like me who experienced extensive childhood sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse, if you experienced any of those things, your nervous system may still have parts that are back there living in that traumatic reality still. And that is why we work with them. We work with them to help them liberate. And these hold frozen emotions, basically. They're just suspended in time. They stay hidden because the protective parts are working so hard to keep them buried. I believe if we didn't have the protective parts there trying to keep them buried, they would be up in our face until we resolved them, until we did the healing work that we needed to do. Our exiles, are really overwhelming when we don't have the support. I think that my stance is there's nothing within us that we haven't already experienced. So there's really nothing to fear in us. But our managers, they don't know that. They don't know that yet because in the past, it probably wasn't safe. So our protective parts fear that if the exile's pain surfaces, it will overwhelm your entire system. I hear this all the time when I do IFS work with clients. Their parts articulate, their managers especially, I don't want to look at that exile. I don't want to bring this to the surface because if I do, I'm going to be so overwhelmed, I'm going to miss a week of work. There's this fear that you will be flooded with emotions that you can't handle. And even that others will see you in your vulnerability, see you in your emotions and reject you, or that you will be re-traumatized. Of course, all of these are valid fears that it could happen, but with proper support, it's entirely possible to make spaciousness for these exiles to express without overloading the system. And that's where we negotiate, we set up safety, we create structure for working with these parts. And our healing ultimately happens when we can bring these parts back with compassion. I see you, I'm here, you're safe now. They might not believe us. That's part of the ongoing work because if our exiles have been exiled without attention, they're like, screw you, you've ignored me this whole time. And they can be quite reasonably angry. But the reality of this is our exiled parts don't heal in isolation. They don't heal by being kept down there in the dark by themselves. They need to be witnessed. The more that we try to push them away, the more they try to get our attention. I've used the example before of a little kid tugging on our sleeve, trying to show us a picture drawing they've done. If we keep ignoring them and pushing them away, they're going to tug harder, they're going to get louder, they might cry. Our exiles are kind of the same, right? If we keep actively pushing one away that really needs our attention, it will bubble up and out eventually. And that can look really ugly for all parties involved, especially ourselves. And that's where the firefighters kick in hardcore. So it's important to remember that, the exiles influence our behavior from the shadows. So we want to go down into the shadows, bring some light in, help them out so that they can influence us in a different way. And it's really cool when we work with exiles, we can alchemize them. They can be reborn with a greater purpose for us. And actually find really beautiful meaning in some of their past experiences and what that has taught them that their system needs in terms of safety, peace, etc. If they're not healed, they will keep us stuck in old patterns. Firefighters. So, firefighters are like emergency responders. That's why they're called firefighters in this system. When an exile gets triggered and the pain starts to surface, the firefighter will try to jump in with immediate relief. Common firefighters look like substance use. This can be alcohol, drugs, medication, binge eating or restricting food, compulsive shopping or spending, dissociation or numbing out, rage and explosive anger, risky sexual behavior, sex porn addiction, for example, excessive exercise, scrolling social media for hours, or being a workaholic. Again, these are just a few examples of firefighters, but I really, I think that it's important to understand what all of these are trying to do. All of these examples are usually maladaptive coping because we're talking here addictions and behaviors that pose risk. Harmonized firefighters can look more like caretakers or suggesters stepping in to give us more adaptive coping mechanisms. But until we're really conscious of this cycle, it's hard to have any firefighters that are responding in a really positive way. Because again, their role is to distract you from emotional pain, provide immediate, even though it's usually temporary relief, and numb or redirect from the overwhelming feelings. Firefighters often get a bad rap because they so often engage in behaviors that look destructive or impulsive from the outside. And they often are. I want to be so clear there. They're trying to protect you from unbearable pain. They are stepping in when your managers can't prevent that exile from being triggered. And they provide relief when your system's overwhelmed. The firefighters are trying to get you back into your window of tolerance. The problem is that the strategies often have consequences that are undesired. So, health issues, financial problems, damaged relationships. If we go back to our examples here, alcohol, drugs, medication can obviously have an impact on your health, your finances, and your relationships. Binge eating or restricting food stuff can obviously impact your health. It can potentially impact your finances, your relationships. If you are dissociating and numbing out all the time, you're going to have a hard time being in relationships. If you are engaged in risky sexual behavior or sexual addiction, it's going to be hard to have happy, healthy relationships. So, our firefighters are so important because they're protecting us, but can we liberate them into a more adaptive coping strategy? Because again, they provide this short-term relief in the moment, but they do not solve the underlying core wound. They do not heal that on our behalf. They're distracting. And unfortunately, these strategies can create shame, which activates more managers, which exhausts you further. The solution is in understanding what pain, so what exile is underneath that particular firefighter steps in around. So we can, again, go in, help that exile to liberate. And one last little note there that I just want to say about our firefighters is that our firefighters can become managers. So if we're chronically, and I'll use alcohol as the example because I think most of us are familiar with this, whether we've struggled with alcoholism in the past or we have a family member. But alcohol starts as a firefighter, right? It's I have this trauma, I have this pain, I want to avoid this feeling that keeps coming up. I'm going to drink to take the edge off. And then that particular, because there's so much chemistry in the brain and genetics and all of that with alcohol in particular, that can end up becoming a manager. And that's when it looks like alcoholism, because now alcohol is being used as a management strategy ongoing to try and keep the pain at bay. So any of our firefighters could potentially become a manager if that strategy keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, because the system is like, okay, well, I'll just manage everything via this strategy. So just kind of a word when we look at our own patterns there of, has that happened to you? Have you had a strategy, a coping strategy, or a firefighter that became chronic and shifted into management territory? Again, no shame, awareness. So now let's talk about the cycle. You could literally draw this in a wheel and see this play out. So this is how most of us work. Our managers running the show, bebopping along in life. They're trying hard. They're keeping us safe. They are being acceptable out in society. They're keeping things in control. They're doing their thing. Something triggers an exile. It could be a reminder of an old pain, a feeling of shame comes up, something scares us, something triggers an exile. Managers are going to temporarily try harder to contain the exile, but they're not going to be able to. That's just, they just can't. The exile's emotions come up more strongly. The pain starts to surface. So overwhelming emotion and old beliefs activated. Oh no, emergency. The firefighters jump in with immediate relief. They are attempting to numb us, distract us, make us feel angry, rage. There's a difference between healthy anger and unhealthy anger. There's a difference between righteous rage and destructive rage. So our firefighters usually go to the really destructive kind of rage and just, Hulk smash type feelings. But managers then criticize us for the firefighter behavior, which thus adds to the shame, goes down into the exile pile. And then the exile feels more shame, confirming their core wound, and the cycle repeats. So the manager gets back control and manages us ongoing. Again, I don't think I actually said a number earlier, but I would say we're probably in our managers 60 to 80% of the time. And then the exiles and the firefighters come up the rest. But we're usually in managers. So when we want to break the cycle, it means recognizing when parts of us activate. And this is so important. Not I'm anxious, but a part of me is feeling anxious. Because I am anxious is owning and attempting to own that our entire system is anxious. But that's not ever really true. I have yet to see ever an indicator that it's even possible for our whole system to feel exactly the same throughout. In other words, a part of you might be anxious, but there's a part of you in there that still feels hope. There's a part of you in there that's rolling your eyes, going, oh my gosh, this is such not a big deal. Let's get over it, right? There's a variety or a multiplicity of parts having different responses at a time. So when we can say, a part of me is feeling this, it helps us begin to externalize, which can help us work with that part more. And we really want to thank our protective parts for their intentions. This actually can soften the behavior. So, for example, let's just say you have a controller type manager. And this part is like, oh my gosh, did you check your to-do list? Did you look at your schedule? Did you do this? Did you do that? Right? And our brain is rushing and racing and we're so overloaded. We can say, hey, thank you. Thank you for trying to make sure I've got all of my ducks in a row. Really appreciate that. This is not necessarily super helpful right now. I'm going to take 15 minutes to do what you'd like me to do and look through this. But after that, we're not worrying about it anymore. We're going to trust that we figured it out. We can talk to our parts like that. We can renegotiate the things that are rushing through our heads and in our bodies. When we feel an exile come up, we want to turn towards that part with compassion. So, for example, big fear comes up. Maybe you saw, I'm going to just use the example, you saw someone in public that was from your past and it scared the heck out of you because it triggered all this old stuff. And so you're in a safe space now, and that exile is there, and they're all riled and they're triggered, and your body is shaky and you're sweaty. And you put a hand on your heart and you go, that was really scary. That was really overwhelming. I see you. I'm with you. We're safe now. And maybe you do a no tiger twist and you look around your space and you see that in fact you are safe now. The wrong answer is go away, I don't want to talk to you. That was in the past, get over it. That's probably a manager trying to control the situation. Turning towards the exile with compassion is a big practice that changes everything. And then we can help the exile release its burden. That is where it's really important to work with a therapist or with a professional to really work through that, because if we try to dive into our exiles alone, it can be very triggering and very trauma flooding. So it's good to have another nervous system in the room until we have our self, capital S, on lockdown. So, to move towards self, we want to practice radical self acceptance. This is welcoming all parts of us. Radical self acceptance means accepting you as you are right now, including all parts, even the ones that you have been taught to reject. And that's another thing. Sometimes parts of you that you've been taught to reject can end up as exiled parts. For me, as a queer person, I definitely had so much of that part of my identity locked away and in a corner, buried down deep for many, many years. Even though that part of me had no need to be there, society and other experiences taught me to reject it. So know that if you've been taught to reject a part, that's probably more about society and generational trauma than it has to do with you. And that's where we want to invite in radical self acceptance. So, radical acceptance is a concept from, I first read from Tara Brach. I don't know if she is actually the originator of the concept, but for me, I've taken this into radical self acceptance, acknowledging all parts of you without judgment, understanding that every part developed for a reason, a good reason, creating space for your emotions, your needs, your desires, accepting your body, your history, your complexity exactly as it is, and treating yourself with compassion. Again, trauma, traumatic memories. So many of us have been traumatized. It's really hard to accept our trauma. It's hard to accept the parts of us that have experienced trauma. But radical self acceptance is accepting all of it, not as it's okay that happened, or it's all right, these bad things happened to me, but as I accept myself, even though I have experienced these things. So it really is this deeper compassion practice. And oh my gosh, if we could all just be compassionate to ourselves, the world would be a very different place, wouldn't it? So radical self acceptance is not excusing harmful behavior towards others. So I always love to use this example. It's not going, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm a bitch, and then being mean to people and being like, well, I'm just a Scorpio. That's not radical self acceptance. No shade to Scorpios. I love you. I've just heard this example used so many times that I like to throw it out there. We don't get to excuse our harmful behavior towards others. I believe that no matter what diagnoses we have or what we've been through, we do not have the right to treat other people poorly. So we're not making excuses for ourselves and saying, oh, well, I get a free pass because I went through that thing. Not the goal. Radical self acceptance is not refusing to take responsibility for your impact. Remember, we are in the ownership arc of elements of success right now. So, radical self acceptance is also ownership, owning our experiences, owning what we've been through, owning how that's impacted us, but not going out there and doing harm. Radical self acceptance is not spiritual bypassing, it's not toxic positivity. And it's not settling or giving up on doing our work, right? It's not going, well, I'm just traumatized and I'm going to be that way for forever. It is not letting parts run wild without boundaries. Self acceptance, especially radical self acceptance, looks so much more grounded in the desire for expansion, not always being forced to heal and do the work all the time, but expanding into more health, more happiness, more alignment. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, to step into radical self-acceptance because it requires us to have a different attitude towards ourselves in a society and a culture that profits from us rejecting ourselves. You have been taught to reject your body and to buy products to fix it. You have been taught to reject your desires and to suppress them because they're shameful, to reject your needs and instead be low maintenance and not have needs, to reject your anger and to always be pleasant and kind and smiling. You may have been taught to reject your vulnerability and to be strong and independent and to not rely on others. And you may have been taught to reject your pain and stay positive. So all of those things are so common in society, right? It's basically reject you and be a good contributing member of society. That is what I was taught growing up. So in a world like that, radical self-acceptance is revolutionary. My managers are trying their best to protect me. My exiles deserve to be witnessed and healed, not hidden. My firefighters are doing what they can with the tools they have, and I can help them get healthier. All of my parts are welcome at the table. I can create safety for my whole internal system. And that's the key right there. I can create safety for my whole internal system. Not making excuses, accepting that they've been through what they've been through. And now it's time for us, the adult, the self with the capital S, to step in and take care. So, one big thing I just wanted to talk about today is body sovereignty in your parts, because your body is where your parts live and they express themselves. And this is such a fascinating thing. This is as unique to you as it possibly can be. I'll give a few specific examples of myself, but generalizations here. Parts can show up in the body by just a couple examples. Managers creating tension. So maybe tight shoulders, clenched jaw, rigid posture. The managers are trying to hold it together, right? And run the tight ship. The exiles hold a lot of pain. They might come with things like heaviness in your chest, knots in your stomach, a very collapsed small energy, literal discomforts, tingles, pain, nausea, you name it. And firefighters often activate our nervous system. So could be dissociation, numbness, hyperactivation, etc., and all the things that come with that. I want to give just, like I said, a few personal examples. So when I am rushing around, I often find that I get a cramp on the top of my right foot. Okay. So specific. And the cramp is always between my pinky toe and my fourth toe, right back like 2 inches on the top of my foot. It's so specific. And I get this cramp right there when I am rushing around. Now, I could be energetically rushing, or I could literally be like hustling to the other side of the house because I'm in distress. I'm rushing, and I will get this very specific pain on the top of my foot right there between my toes. And that is a part of me saying, slow down. You're doing that thing. Stop rushing. I have another part. I get pings of pain either here on my head or here on my head. One means I am feeling unloved by others, and one means I'm feeling unloved by myself. And so when I get that pain in my head, I tune in. Okay, I'm self-devaluating right now, or I'm upset because I feel like so and so doesn't love me. So our parts communicate through these little pain signals, through tingles, through symptoms, through all kinds of means. And when we can get curious about reoccurring things, I think we can really change the name of the game. So, body sovereignty means your body belongs to you, not to an external system or person. You have complete autonomy over your body. You get to decide what feels good and what does not. And your body sensations are information, not problems to fix, right? If I completely ignored, oh my gosh, I'm having pain in my foot. Um, do I need to take meds to stop the pain? Do I need to go to the doctor? Is my foot broke? Like I could go in so many different directions. Simply by tuning in and paying attention, the sensation goes away because I get the message, oh, you're rushing. It's time to slow down. Ah, okay. And then there is no problem anymore. Reclaiming. Oh, reclamation. We all need our reclamation arc, right? And reclaiming our body from shame and limiting narratives is something we all have the challenge to do. Because again, you've been taught to reject your body. You've been taught that you need to use all these different products and care for it in this way. And self care is expensive and blah, 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 blah. So, purity culture may have taught you your body and desires are sinful. Diet culture may have taught you that your body is always wrong and needs fixing. Ableism taught you that your body must be productive to have value. Patriarchy teaches you that your body exists for others' consumption. And capitalism teaches us that our body is a tool for productivity. Let that shit go. It's time to let it go. We don't have to embrace these ways of thinking. And when we reject these things, when we reclaim our sovereignty, when we reclaim ourself, these systems lose power over us. So again, it's an ongoing thing. I know it's not just an easy one and done, but these are the systems that keep us trapped. So let's talk a bit about creating internal safety for your parts. You know, safety can be very hard to come by, especially if you have experienced trauma. So I don't want to trivialize this and just say, create that safety. That's it. Do it and you'll be fine. Uh, if only, right? Internal safety means that no part of us is going to be rejected, shamed, or exiled by us moving forward. It means that all of our emotions are allowed and will be witnessed within us. It means we will thank our protective parts for bringing information to us, not criticizing them, but also not letting them run the show. Internal safety means we will hear our exiles, we will release their burdens, we will get the help that we need to make that happen. And you, yourself, with the capital S, are present, compassionate, and capable of showing up. Self, I don't really get into that this episode, but self is characterized by what I call like this thread to our higher selves. Self with a capital S could be seen as our higher self, our true self, our soul. It's really boring. Self is pretty boring. It's kind of like the same across the board between person to person. So when we access self, it feels very calm, very here in the moment, very capable of handling the challenges. But a lot of us don't have that access to self yet because, for the most part, the managers are trying so hard to take control and be a stand in self. The goal is never to be in self all the time. It is to create safety for our parts to access self when they need it. So, to create this internal safety, we want to notice when parts are activated and we want to acknowledge it as a part. Oh, a part of me is feeling really anxious right now, not I'm anxious. We want to get curious rather than critical. What does this part need from me right now? Thank those protective parts. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I appreciate it. Turn towards those exiles with compassion. Again, this sort of, I see you, I'm here, you're not alone. And offer new options. We have other ways to handle this now. Hey, system update. Parts don't know all the time what the rest of the system knows. You might be operating from a part that literally has no clue you have updated coping skills because they are in the pattern. So I like to call it a system update. And I tell my part, hey, system update. In reality, right now, this is what our circumstances look like. And we have this toolbox now. And then we update that part on what has changed. So let's talk about ownership and these parts, because that is the arc we're in with Aether. Your managers are probably pretty exhausted from running your life and trying to prevent every possible pain. So let's work to befriend them. Acknowledge their hard work. Thank you. You've been working so hard to keep me safe. Understand their fears. What are you afraid is going to happen if you relax? Offer them reassurance. I, aka self, can handle things now. You don't have to do this alone. Give them new roles. So the perfectionist, for example, could become the helpful editor. The critic could become the discerning advisor. So we want to empower them to do what they're good at doing, but not what I call drive the bus. We do not want our parts driving the bus all the time unless they are a very aligned part and it is their role, because we're not, again, we're never going to be in self all the time. We want to be in healthy managers managing our life, not super controlling ones. So we can create agreements with our parts. Hey, let's check in, make a plan before I let this part of me step in to run the show. Um, I'll never forget, I had a client who was going to court, and her exile, having to do with the person she was going to court with, right, was so activated. And she told this part of her, hey, I know this is really scary. We're going into court. I'm going to give you a paintbrush and a canvas, and I'm going to invite you to go paint. You don't have to be in the courtroom at all. You don't have to show up. We're going to bring in bad bitch mode, and she's going to be the one who's going to go into the courtroom. And this is more of like a manager, right? So this client literally put the exile in a nice cushy room in her subconscious, gave her an easel and, paint supplies, and let her do her thing. And then she allowed a manager part that was confident and knew what she was doing right come in and step forward and temporarily drive the bus through the court case so that her system wouldn't get overloaded. And that just is a perfect example of how, when we get to know these parts and we befriend them and we have more negotiating style relationships with them, we can have a really healthy internal relationship. We want to help them relax, because what happens when they relax is that you have more energy because you're not constantly trying to control things. You don't have parts of you running all around like their hair is on fire trying to control every outcome. You can be more authentic because you're not performing from these parts. You're allowing them to inform the system, but not drive the bus. You can take more risks because failure doesn't feel as life threatening. And you can be more vulnerable because rejection doesn't mean annihilation. It doesn't mean you're going to die and it's the end of the world. Self-ownership healing your exiles. I again note it is so advised to work with a professional to do deep healing work. When you work with your exiles, it is deep trauma healing work because these are the parts of you that hold trauma. So please don't walk into trying to heal your exiles and talk to them all the time and bring them up to the surface without some external support, because those parts are so charged, right? That if we have not scaffolded and built our way up to being able to hold them and we're trying to summon them, it's going to be really, really overwhelming. But again, here are some general tips. When we're healing our exiles, we want to turn towards them, not away from them. We don't want to continue the trend of rejection. When we feel shame, grief, or old pain, we want to stay present to it for as long as we can, not digging in deep and burying ourselves in it. But again, kind of like leaning towards that child. Hey, I see you. This hurts. That memory really hurts. Witness their story. What happened to you? What did you need that you didn't get? And can you offer them then what they needed? Love, protection, validation, belonging. Usually, when I'm doing this kind of work with clients, I'm guiding some of the questions and doing a lot of this assessment so that we can get right to what does that part actually need. Then there's a process of releasing their burdens. You don't have to carry the shame or belief anymore. It was never yours to begin with. This was given to you, handed to you, put upon you by whatever force created that trauma, what do you need to come safely back into the system? You're not exiled anymore. You belong here. You're safe now. It's so much more complex than this, but that's essentially the end goal, is for that exile to be like, oh, okay, I don't have to keep being in this pain all the time. I don't have to bring this charge screaming back up to the surface. And what happens when we heal our exiles is they stop controlling you from the shadows. They're not operating from those limiting beliefs anymore. They're not operating from the need to avoid that pain. The pain transforms. It does not disappear. The memories don't go away, but it no longer overwhelms you. So there's more self acceptance, and a core belief shift can happen. So, if, for example, it's I'm unlovable, this belief might now be I'm worthy of love. And that's when we really know that the update has happened, when we ask our parts what they believe. And they're like, yeah, I don't believe that thing from the past anymore. That thing from the past happened. But in fact, right, insert self acceptance here. And our firefighters can calm down because there's no longer that same level of pain to escape. So they don't have to go into their overfunctioning roles. Generally speaking, you will feel more whole and integrated. And then finally, self ownership of our firefighters. Our firefighters need compassion, not shame. When we shame our firefighters, they dig in deeper. We know this, especially, around substance use and abuse. When you shame somebody who has an active addiction part, and we'll call it that, the addict part of them, the whole person is not an addict. They have a part of them with an addiction. It's a firefighter or a manager, more than likely, who is trying to smooth things over. When we shame that, especially if it's a firefighter, it's going to get stronger. So it's so important that we not go to shame, but we go to compassion, not excuses. If you've been here with me before, you know my very popular phrase, compassion does not equal enabling. That's true of ourselves. Enabling ourselves to do harm to ourselves is not compassionate. So again, don't shame them. It just creates more pain for them to manage. So instead, appreciate their intention. Hey, thanks for trying to help me feel better. I see that you're trying to help me feel better. And get curious, what triggered them? What exile got activated? What emotion, belief, etc. got touched? And then we can maybe do something about that. What else could help right now? What do I really need right now, right? Offer alternatives to these parts. Working on befriending them leads to so many good things, because if we befriend our firefighters, they don't need to be so extreme because you're already there with them. You're addressing the pain. You are staying present. If you can befriend them, you can help them make more conscious choices instead of being impulsively reactive. I think I said this at the beginning. Your firefighters can become more like self-care deliverers, caretakers of your parts in a healthier, more aligned way, so you can develop healthier coping strategies. The part of you that once went to alcohol might go to herbal tea, right? It's just like little system updates that we begin to say, oh, okay, you're really wanting to calm down. That's why normally you're reaching for the alcohol. Okay, well, maybe holy basil or chamomile or St. John's wort, or insert any other number of herbs here, might be a better alternative. Talk to your doctor and or herbalist and or whatever if you are going to introduce new substances. But you get to reclaim agency over your own responses when you have befriended your firefighters. So finally, self-ownership transforms your relationships. This is why it's so important. We all want happy, healthy relationships. We all want to be connected. And when you embrace all parts of yourself with compassion, again, compassion does not equal enabling. It's not about making excuses. It's about empowerment. But when you embrace all parts of yourself with compassion, your relationships can shift. You will stop abandoning yourself to maintain connections with others who aren't really for you. You can be vulnerable without fear because your exiles feel safe. You can set boundaries without guilt because your managers can relax and say, yeah, if they reject me because I have a boundary, they're not for me. You're less reactive because you understand what it looks like when your firefighters are activated and you can actually do something about it. You're able to ask for what you need because you honor all parts of yourself. and you attract people who appreciate your whole authentic self. This happens because you're modeling that all parts are welcome. That gives others permission. You are showcasing you have the capacity for intimacy because you're not managing internal warfare and you have happier, healthier, more harmonious relationships with your parts. And you can see others more clearly because you're not projecting your exiled parts on others. You're tending to them within yourself, which means you don't have to put them out here to get them out of you. that could Projection itself could be a firefighter. So I know, as I said, today was going to be a longer episode. We are to our meditation, so we are going to drop in here. Thank you for being with me if you're still with me. I hope that this has been helpful to really elucidate on why our systems operate the way that they do. But I'm going to invite you, we're not going to work with an exile because we're not going to go into the trauma. We're not going to work with a firefighter because the firefighters are already about the trauma. So we're going to work with a manager. I'm going to invite you to just take a moment to breathe. Feel your body. And just notice if there's any tension in your body right now, if there's any gripping, or if you feel relatively easeful. Just noticing, no judgment. And we're going to just sort of scan our day to day for a manager. What's a part of you that is usually pretty present, that tries to help you run your life? Might be a little board manager or CEO. It might be a planner. Could be an overachiever. This is a part of you that day to day tries to make sure you won't get hurt, you won't get rejected, and you won't fail. Does this part have an appearance? Does it look like you, but stuffier, more proper, held taller, furiously scribbling over a notebook? Just notice what features, how does this part act in body language, how they hold themselves? Do we want to give this part a nickname? For example, I worked with a part called Overachieving Olga for a time. There could be a controlling Kathy. The name doesn't have to be yours. It could also just be the planner part, the achiever. But seeing this manager part of you as both part of you and separate from you, imagining them standing in front of you. And let's hear a little bit of their story. Why are they doing what they're doing? What goal and dream do they have for you? And how have they been trying to achieve that, helping you get to your dream? Is there something they'd like to do differently? Is there a way they could see themselves doing their job in a more collaborative way with you? Is there any support this part needs from you? Are there any other messages they'd like to give you today? Is there a place in the body that this part lives? And just noticing all of that information, anything that came through. Let's just give gratitude to this manager part. Thank you for doing your best to help me manage my life. I'd like to be in an even better relationship with you, to support you to do your role in an even more harmonized way. And I'm so grateful for the ways you've tried to protect me. How does that manager feel having some acknowledgement? And then with one last thank you, you might let that part step back into your body or go to that place in your body where they normally live. But just gently releasing any conscious attention onto that part, coming back to the full body, head to toe, taking a nice deep breath, and knowing that you have the power to transform your inner relationships with yourself, with all parts of you. And that as you do this, you will step into more and more empowerment, more harmony, and happier, healthier relationships. Maybe wiggle the fingers and toes. And if your eyes closed, you can gently blink them open. And let's go into our no tiger twist. Looking down and up, slowly twisting the spine. Looking back behind you, coming back over to the other side. Nice big deep breath. Whew. All right. So that brings us to the end of the episode today. And integration practices here. This week, consider acknowledging your parts. When you notice strong emotion or behavior, pause and ask, what part of me is activated? What came up here? What part of me has come to the front? And name it. This is my perfectionist manager. This is a firefighter trying to help me numb. This is an exile who is vying for my attention. Get curious. What does this part of me need? What is it protecting me from? And thank it. Thank you for trying to help. Let's see. We have a comment here. Took a long walk today, physically feel good, emotionally doing fine as well. I don't know what the inner manager is doing. I mean, we have so many different inner managers, right? And they might be trying to maintain our status quo. They might be trying to keep us calm, just try and kind of keep us where we're at. Managers don't want us to spike into really high emotions, but it's important to just notice the ways that they might intervene. So, until next time, we will be talking about recognizing self sabotage patterns next time. So, self sabotage absolutely can be a firefighter part, it can be a manager part, can be an exile part. It's one of those things that can come from a lot of different directions. But we will talk about common self sabotage patterns and their roots, how internalized oppression creates self sabotaging behaviors, protection mechanisms that no longer serve you, cultural conditioning around success, worthiness, and pleasure, understanding the why behind those sabotage patterns, and then tools for breaking limiting cycles with compassion. So, continuing our ownership arc, it is hard to believe we only have, I believe, 7. Well, okay, technically, when you count, I think it's 8. It's so hard for me to do math of, is this a math where the number itself is included in the end number of, yeah. Anyway, we either have 7 or 8 episodes left, but I am so excited to continue this series with you. I hope that you learned something useful today and that you can be gentler and kinder to your parts because they are doing their best sincerely to help you, to protect you from this wild world we live in. And again, the more that you harmonize your parts and you have this inner healthy relationship with yourself, the more you can co-create that out in the world. So until next time, my friends, I'm Safriana Luna. Bye for now.